Hello, everyone. Welcome to our session today about what the AI native era means for accounting and how finance teams are adapting. My name is Shannon Canzanella, and I'm going to be your host for our conversation today, which is being brought to you by Accounting Seed, the number one accounting solution built on Salesforce. So, why are we here today? What are we talking about? I don't think anybody is going to be surprised when I say the role of the accountant is changing fast. The way accountants are expected to do their work, the skills they're expected to bring, and even what the next hire is going to look like, all of that is shifting. And it can feel a little overwhelming, right? Even maybe a little bit scary, if I'm honest. This is the kind of change that feels like the industrial revolution for the accounting profession, right? Like that's the scale of impact AI is having on accounting and really our society as a whole, right? So I'm just going to share a few scenarios and I want you to take these in and just think about if any of them feel familiar to you right now. So maybe you used to spend days on bank reconciliations, but now your job is knowing when the auto match is wrong, when the automation's not working. Maybe you used to spend so much time building reports and pulling the data together, but now you're expected to interpret it and guide the decisions behind it. Maybe you used to have a full team around you, and now you're being told to do more with less, with fewer teammates coming up behind you. Or maybe you're in a place where you feel like you used to know the tools that mattered, you had a handle on that. And now AI is coming at you from every direction, from your CFO, from vendors, from your LinkedIn feed, and you're genuinely not sure where to start, what's real, why you should care. If any of that resonates with you at all, you are in the right place for the right conversation because here is the flip side to this. And this is something that we at Accounting Seed feel very passionate about. This is not a story about accountants getting replaced and that we don't need accountants anymore. That is false, and we really hate hearing that. This is actually the story about the accountants who lean into AI coming out on top with more influence, with more strategic work, and frankly, more interesting careers than maybe we've seen in a long time. There is real opportunity in this moment, and it's exciting. And that's what we want to talk to you about today. But before we get into that discussion, I want to just run through some stats with you so we can see what the data is saying about all of this. So, the first thing we see on the screen here is 85% of CFOs say they see AI's potential in finance and are actively exploring that. So, that's different than using it today, in exploration mode, right? At the same time, 3 out of 4 of today's accounting professionals could retire within the next 15 years. That's a lot. And the CPA exam candidates have dropped 27% over the last decade. And 35% of CFOs say that they're open to hiring candidates from outside the traditional accounting background. So think data science, IT, operations, that sort of realm. So, what we want to do today is to break all of this down into something really practical for us. We're going to talk through three different things. Number one, what is actually changing in the day to day work for accounting, how it is changing, including the parts that are already here versus what's coming, like what we see on the horizon. And more importantly, what this means for you as an accountant or a finance leader, and how to adapt so you can come out ahead and succeed in your careers. So, a few quick housekeeping notes before we get started and we introduce our panelists to you. I see some familiar faces on, so you may be thinking, Shannon, this looks very different than webinars we've seen in past. And you would be correct. We are on a brand new webinar system today. We're very excited to bring this to you. So things are in some different places, but all the familiar offerings that you're probably used to. So just going to run through this very quickly. The number one question, is this being recorded? Yes, it is being recorded. Don't you worry. You will get a copy of this recording within about 48 hours, if not sooner. If you are also finding that your screen is very small, there is an expand button on your screen. So be sure to click on that so you can see us in full screen mode. We also will have some polls throughout our session today. So on your little side panel, you should see a polls button. You can actually start voting on some of those now if you'd like to share some feedback with us. This is just our way to get your insights on today's conversation, but we'll also stop and take some time to do those together. You should also see a Q&A button on your side of the screen as well. You can ask questions anonymously. You can put any thoughts, questions, feedback that you might have, and we'll try to get to as many of those as we can towards the end of our session today. And then last but not least, under the resources tab, we are sharing our State of AI in Accounting report. This has a lot of the data that we're actually going to be referencing today, so be sure to download that, and that is a tool you can keep in your tool belt. Okay. All right, let's go ahead and bring our panelists up on stage. Really excited to have Mary and Pete here with us today. These are two people who are really sitting in the center of this change that we're talking about today. Okay, so first and foremost, we have Mary here with us. Mary is our VP of Product here at Accounting Seed. She is a CPA. She is a Salesforce certified professional with over 30 years of experience in developing tax and accounting software. And I don't think I know someone more passionate about AI than Mary. So you're going to get some real great insights from Mary today. Thank you for being with us, Mary. We also have Pete Lambert with us. Pete is our CFO at Accounting Seed. He has nearly 15 years of experience in the accounting and finance space. And he is also living this shift himself, right? Making the same decisions about tools and team structure that many of you on our call today are probably weighing in on right now as well. So you're getting two sides of a coin, right? You're getting the CFO perspective and the product perspective. So really excited to have Pete and Mary with us today. All right, let's get into it, guys. Let's get into the meat, let's get into the fun stuff here. So I really want to kind of ground our conversation in what's actually happening right now. So before we talk about adoption or the accountant shortage, any of that, what we're seeing and hearing right now from our actual survey that we did is that 84% of finance teams are still spending at least a quarter or more of their week on manual repetitive work. So the day-to-day hasn't like magically transformed or changed for anyone, but I think we can all feel something is shifting, something is happening. So Mary, Pete, what are you guys seeing change and what hasn't changed yet?
Yeah, so you're right. Some things are starting to shift. I remember, oh gosh, it seems like a lifetime ago. AI is moving so quickly. It was only probably 2 or 3 years ago we were talking about how work is going to be shifting from doing to reviewing, right?
Yeah.
We were talking about that. Then over the past couple of years, we have seen that. You know, we're product people, so of course we've seen that in product, but as we talk to customers, we're beginning to see that happen. Some examples, Mangrek, right? That's a perfect example of something AI and agents can do for you. Capturing a vendor invoice, right? Capturing all of the data on the invoice, using AI to figure out how to code that invoice so that all you really have to do is review it. That's the human in the loop that always has to be there. And then you submit it for approval, right? So we're seeing the shift begin to happen. We're seeing people start to think about, you know, maybe they have agents in there, but how are they configured? What are the guardrails that they're set up with? And they're starting to enhance some of those guardrails. I've seen that. In terms of what I'm seeing as far as, you know, percentage-wise, still the majority of people are interested. They're asking a lot of questions. For those that are diving in, they're seeing real results and real benefits. And I am overjoyed when I talk to those people because they get it, right? I had my aha moment and I get it completely. And when I see customers, you know, having had that moment and seeing how they're using AI, I just absolutely love it. You know, they're just moving ahead. But the majority of people, I see they're still continuing to do their work day to day. They're busy. They are very busy. Sometimes they're overwhelmed with their work. So they continue to do their jobs as they've always done. They may be afraid of the unknown. They may be uneasy about security. I hear that a lot. Overall, just too busy to dive in. So that's what I'm seeing today. Pete, what do you think?
Yeah, I'll touch on a few things here and go maybe a little deeper on some you mentioned, Mary. I agree with you, as Shannon mentioned, and you reiterated, Mary, that a lot of accounting teams are spending a good portion of their time on manual work, and they still are, right? I did read a recent survey, and about 46% of accountants are now using AI. 2 years ago, that was 28%. So I think it's starting to happen in every day. Now, it's not across every workflow, right? Mary, you mentioned it. Accountants get busy, they're doing something. If it's not broken, it's difficult to change. The key areas that I see and that we've certainly adopted here internally at Accounting Seed are data entry tasks, right? You mentioned entering a vendor payable, right? We've adopted invoice automation technology and then AI technology on top of that to not only create the payable, but also code that payable to the correct general ledger expense account, right? So that we're using internally, we're seeing our customers use that. The same workflow exists on customer billings, right? Automating those customer billings where they're being created and generated by AI technology and automations, and the accountant's playing the reviewer mode, right? Reviewing and approving these invoices or payables, right? I'm not manually entering anymore. I'm playing that reviewer mode. You mentioned bank recs, Mary, auto matching, reconciliation from those customer cash receipts to that specific customer's outstanding invoice. The same thing on the AP side. Those are the key areas that have a lot of volume, low judgment, but a lot of manual work. And we've adopted them. We're seeing customers adopt them. And I think that's a great area to start, adopting AI technology that can make you much more efficient. And again, what I see changing is the accountant is doing much more of that reviewing and approving versus the manual entering, matching, reconciling, right? That's the biggest shift we're starting to see is those key areas.
Yeah, those great thoughts. Like the judgment is starting to matter a lot more and be expected than the manual input of the day-to-day work. Yeah, that's very interesting. Thank you guys for sharing that. If you haven't already voted on our first poll, please do so now. You can access that through the polls tab. That first poll is how much of your team's work is being spent on manual repetitive work today. So I know I see a few more coming through, but we're interested to see what this is looking like for you guys. And if you're in the more than 75%, the help, let us know. We can help you out. We don't want you to be there. We want you to be focused on some more higher impact work, and we can certainly help you do that. I see some of those numbers changing in real time. Very cool. Very cool. All right, we'll leave that up for just a few more seconds here, but it looks like the majority are in that 25 to 50%. So still a good amount of time, right, being spent on manual work each week for our finance teams. All right, let's go ahead and close out that poll and we'll get into our next question. Okay, so one of the things that our survey found was that 63% of finance teams in general are actively exploring AI, but only 16% have implemented it fully into their day-to-day accounting workflows. That's a pretty huge gap, right? And I think the interesting thing is when we really dug into that and asked people why, they weren't saying, "Oh, we don't believe in AI. We're not looking into it." It was things like, my data is living in 5 different systems, or there's so much I need to do before I think about AI. We haven't automated the basics yet, like things like that. So Mary and Pete, I'm curious from you guys, from where you sit, why do you guys think this gap is still so wide right now?
Yeah, I'm sure everybody's reading about AI, right? They're seeing it in their LinkedIn feed, and it's probably just they're getting conflicting information sometimes, and they're just not sure, where to start. You talked about data. Data is important. AI can work on data, but if it's not good data, it's going to give you some pretty interesting results that may not be 100% accurate, right? So data is foundational, right? You've got to have your data in place, and that's why I love, accounting seat on Salesforce. You can have your operational data alongside your finance data that you can trust. You're ready to implement AI on top of that data. Okay. If you haven't taken the time to dig in and understand what AI can do for you, if you haven't had that aha moment yet, then you're not going to be able really to imagine what it can do for your business, what it can do for your teams, how it can benefit you. We're talking about ChatGPT or Claude or whatever tools you want to pick up. All of these are available at what I would tell you is a relatively low cost, considering its capabilities. It is just blows my mind every day when I look at this and I see what it can accomplish. So everybody has the ability today to pick it up and to begin using it, whether it's for personal. I'm just going to create an app because I need an app to do X. There's no reason anymore for people to not just take a small portion of their day to try to understand its capabilities. I'm sure everybody has heard this. AI makes stuff up, and that's the kind of thing that accountants are not very comfortable with, right? We need things to be 100% accurate, not 99%, not 95%. We need things to be 100% accurate. It can be. You need to understand how to use it and how to prompt it. And when you create agents and you create skills, how to use it and how to give it just the right amount of information. And when you do that and you begin to create these agents, they're going to become more and more reliable. And then you'll see that data accuracy improve. I'm not going to say that it will go up to 100% and we're never going to need humans anymore, because we will always need humans. We will always need accountants. Think of your agents as your digital workforce, right? This is just, if you had an additional person or 5 people doing the work, that's all it is really. These agents are doing the work and then you're reviewing that work. So I think as you begin to work with it, you're going to see how you can work with it and how you can ensure that it's reliable, dependable, and accurate for your business. So Pete, I'm sure you have lots of thoughts around this.
Yeah, you did a great job, Mary, of I'll mention data again, right? Data quality is the number one barrier. And on top of that, I'd say like context, right? The AI is not always going to have the context, but the human is, right? That's utilizing it. So even if all your data, it's a problem if it's in siloed systems, getting it in one system where you can, its uniform structure is a big challenge, right? I'd say that's the number one. You did a good job emphasizing that, Mary. And I think the next is the human element of understanding the underlying data. Like I have context of what I'm asking the AI to go retrieve for me, this report for XYZ customers, right? And this level of information. You have to be detailed in your prompting, right? Which is a skill. I think the other piece is readiness and willingness, right? Like we mentioned it earlier, but have you gone through an aha moment, right? Of I can do this work a different way than I currently do. Right now, I'm used to, reconciling my revenue account by looking at all, say, 1,000 accounts, right? And scanning it and comparing each one to the underlying data manually. That's a lot of work and very time consuming. So you mentioned a couple, ChatGPT, Claude, there's others, but there's technology out there today that you can use, right, to do some of that reconciliation, do some of that matching, right? And you just have to have that mental shift of I'm going to do my work differently and utilize AI. I know the underlying data and I know where exceptions may be and how can I be more efficient so I'm not manually have to match this account to this entry. The AI can do some of that for me and I can look at more exceptions. So I think Some of it is your underlying data, and then the other piece is that skill readiness and like willingness of your team, right? Your accounting team to do their job slightly different, right? Just adopt a different way of doing their work. And I think that's in accounting as it is in marketing and sales and every function of a business. Everyone's going to go through that mental shift, every employee, and how can I utilize AI technology to make myself more efficient, better at my job, and produce higher quality work, right? And I think that's a key area that a lot of knowledge workers are going to go through, right? Of getting to that aha moment, and then improving the way they do work with all this underlying technology.
Yes, yeah, it's so true. And the thing here too is nobody is saying that the change isn't difficult, right? Like, I can't remember who said this quote, but it was great people do things before they're ready, right? So, like, to your point, Pete, rather than thinking about complaining about it or not exploring it, taking the other side and saying, how can this make me more efficient at work? How can this make me a better employee? How can this help me to scale my career? Like, again, using it as another tool in your tool belt versus feeding into the fear mongering out there about AI. Like, how can you use it to your benefit and coming at it from that lens? Yeah, it's very, very important. This definitely sets us up for my next question. So what I shared earlier, right, is that 3 out of 4 accountants in the workforce could retire in the next 15 years, and there's less and less people actually sitting in for the CPA exam. And again, at the same time, CFOs are being open to hiring from other departments and, actually pulling talent from different departments. So my question to you two is, what does the next accounting hire look like? What should we expect? And maybe how is that showing up in how both of you think about your own teams and your own team structure?
Yeah, I'll start here. Thanks, Shannon. I think so. For me personally, having someone on your accounting team, you still need that person that has an accounting background knowledge. You may be able to pull other skill sets in to help with that, but I think you need, like, say, you have your team as a controller or bookkeeper, they need to have a strong foundation. I think it's really important to have that because they're not just in do mode now, they're in review of the AI. So I think having that accounting experience knowledge is really important for like a controller seat. And then there's new skill sets, right? They need to have a new technical ability to utilize AI tools. They need AI fluency in these tools. So it's like a new skill set that's being brought to the accountant that I would look for in anyone that I would hire, right? And in probably across the business, but certainly in the accounting world, they need to be able to have some proficiency in AI tools and technology. And then other things, supervisor mindset, right? Are you comfortable as an evaluator of the AI output? Do you have that professional skepticism, right? To understand and question what you're looking at from the AI output work, right? Because we're gonna see a shift of the accountant moving from a producer, manual entry, right, a producer of that work, to much more of a reviewer, right? So, and I think curiosity across the business, right? Like understanding different functional areas of the business versus like I'm just doing my accounting job, right? And now it's much more broad. You still need that background. You need that, AI fluency, technical floor, supervisor mindset, and then I think curiosity across the full business.
You're absolutely right, Pete. I remember that you said something about professional skepticism and being able to really just understand accounting data, how it flows through so that you become that reviewer. I remember years ago I've been in software development the majority of my career, hiring analysts to come in and design software and dig in a little bit. It's like, how would you do X? Well, I don't know how to do X. I push the button and the button would just do it for me, right? That's not what we need here. We need accountants that understand the flow of information. Now, going way back, because I've been in this for decades, I remember going through and doing things manually, right? You manually enter things on a ledger, and then you create the trial balance, and from the trial balance, you create the financial statements. I don't know if people are doing that anymore in school, but they need to understand the flow of data. They need to know how to be able to interrogate any balance and understand where it came from and how it ended up in each statement. So I don't know how that's being done today, but you're certainly right in terms of moving from that doer to being able to review and supervise and interrogate that data. I think, you said that you'd be looking for people with experience with AI. And again, you go back and it hasn't been that long since we had AI. So for me, in my role, if I were hiring someone today, I'd certainly ask the question, what kind of experience do you have with AI? And it wouldn't necessarily be looking at what kind of experience that do you have on the job. If someone comes back and says, oh, I use AI and, for emails, or use AI to do some research, or maybe I use it to help me go do some shopping, whatever it is, that's almost like so yesterday, right? Yeah. Today we have the capabilities are just absolutely incredible. What we have today is the ability to create an agent with a skill that can do a function for you, that can complete a task. And if I were hiring someone, I would listen and I would hopefully hear about how that someone had a problem to solve. And this is the way they went about doing that. I'm seeing some teams, as we talk to customers, we talk to a lot of customers, we talk to partners, in terms of how teams are being formed today. I'm seeing teams that have, your traditional accountants, and then they're bringing more technical skills to the table. So whether it's the accountant that has the technical chops, or they're bringing on, maybe in our world, Salesforce admin along, they work more closely with the finance teams.
Yeah.
And I think this is a very positive move for the profession, moving to be more technical in nature, but that doesn't mean you have to know how to code. It just means that you need to really kind of dive into AI and understand what it can do for you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, great points. I agree. I think it is definitely a positive thing for the profession. And again, expanding the tools in your tool belt, right? That's great. I know many of you have voted on our second poll. So let's go ahead and bring that up here. If you haven't voted yet, you still can, it's still open. But we wanted to hear from you guys to see, when was the last time you added somebody to your accounting team that was not from a traditional accounting background? So right now it looks like the majority have not yet, which we get that, right? That's something that we're talking about that's coming, and how the role is going to be changing and evolving to that blend that Mary was talking about, the blending of technical and accounting skills together. But yeah, it's coming soon. But there's some of you that, yes, have in the last year, you're already considering it. So that is exciting stuff. Really exciting, guys. All right, let's go ahead and close that poll out. Thank you guys for participating in that one as well. Okay, let's get into our next question. You guys know me, I love to get real tangible. So this is where we're headed. If an accountant is watching this right now and they're thinking, thank you, Mary and Pete, this is great information. What do I do with this? What are, the skills, the mindsets, the habits that you guys feel like really matter most right now? And what is separating someone who is really future-proofing themselves from someone who might end up getting left behind?
Yeah, good question. Like I said previously, you don't need to learn how to code. You have agents that can do this work for you. I would say, prompting, I remember back when ChatGPT was first introduced, it's like prompt engineering. Everybody has to learn prompt engineering, right? It is relevant. It is absolutely relevant. But now that we have, agents and skills and these sorts of things, you need to understand how to prompt in a way where you can get the best results. I think now my biggest challenge, and this is something I'm working through myself, how do you provide prompt, let's say an agent, to give to provide enough information to where you're going to get good results? And I have been on both ends of the spectrum, I'll tell you now. I've tried just to see what would happen, giving a very high level guidance. And when I did that pretty recently, it went around in a loop that I couldn't get out of. It just didn't, there were too many options for it. So I shut it down. I was like, okay, baby, we're going to have to go back to the drawing board. Let me give you a little bit more information. So finding that, how much information, how much prompt is enough. If you give it too much, it's just going to be stuck, and it'll come up with, it will do what it can. And what I found is that it will very confidently do something incorrect, bring back something that's incorrect. So it's just enough. You have to find that just enough. And that's easier said than done. And you need to just be working with it until you find the prompt that is just enough information. And it really is. It's every individual is going to have to work with it to determine how, and to improve how you prompt it. You need to be comfortable shifting from that doer to reviewer. We've already talked about that before. You can't be afraid of AI taking your job. AI is never going to take your job. Humans are always going to be in the loop. We're going to need to be doing that reviewing, and we're going to need to. It's not really different than when you hire interns or other staff and you're the supervisor. So think of it that way. Shift your mind, as Pete had suggested. It is a mind shift, and just think about these agents doing the work instead of humans, and you come in to supervise their work. Okay. If you haven't started yet, I would recommend taking some courses. I went up on Claude's site, and they have, Anthropic is great. They've got Claude 101. They have Claude Code 101. They have a ton of classes. And if you haven't already, I would suggest just going in there, taking these classes, and create an app, whether it's for personal purposes, for business. Doesn't have to be complicated, but try and make it useful. It can't be hello world. Okay, that's a little bit too simple, right? Create an app, make it useful, and that hands-on experience is going to open a new world for you.
Great, Mary.
All great points, Mary. I'll add on a bit here. You covered a lot of important topics there. I'd say, as employees, you can't blindly trust AI, right? You can't blindly say, okay, I gave it a prompt, I asked for this, it gave me an output, and I just blindly trust it, right? You have to understand the business, your business. You have to understand what you believe the output would be, right, to review it. I think an important thing we talk about prompting or building a skill into an agent is providing context to the AI. I think the context layer is really important, right? Instead of giving it a general prompt or building a general skill, you have to give it context of what you're looking for. I'm looking for, my ARR of my customer base and this division from, I'll say, the contract object in Salesforce or something, because it may not know where to look, right? You may have ARR by customer in various places throughout your organization, your data structure. So I think providing context on the skills or the prompting you do with AI is critical, and then not blindly trusting it, right? Like, play that reviewer. You understand your business the best, right? You've been an accountant or an employee of your business for a long time. You should understand when AI is right and not, and then getting that context layer and built in with your review, I think is critical. So I think you mentioned a lot of other ones, Mary, having that mindset shift. Be curious. Start with something, but try to go deeper than just hello world. But I think the technology's there. Just start. Start, right. Have that mindset shift and start working with AI.
Yeah.
Yeah, you mentioned, Pete, that context layer, and that's a very important piece. People are starting now to realize you don't want to prompt something from ground zero every time you do something, right? So you need that context layer. I've had personal experience myself with that. It's like, why do I have to tell you this? I've already told you this, right? And it's all about context. So building in that layer is really going to help. But you may not even understand what we're talking about. If you don't dive in now, learn AI, and you're going to see context come up, and you'll begin to understand more what that means.
Mhm. Yes, yeah, and it's really cool once it starts to really get going and learning from the past experiences and the prompting that you have given it in the past. I know, myself, I sit in the marketing department here, right? And there's so much that we've been able to accomplish with like co-work, right? And just diving in and trying and messing up and figuring out and reworking it, but always coming back to the table with curiosity and willingness to learn. And that's been the big thing that's made a difference. It makes a difference, right? Yeah. Okay, our last and final question, guys. I'm thinking about the CFO, or like a finance team lead. Okay, if there's someone on this call who is leading a team and they want to prepare their team for this shift starting this week, what would you recommend they do tomorrow? What do they start doing?
I'll jump in here first. I say, I'm not going to say step one. I'd say step zero, right? Trust your data, right? Make sure your underlying data is unified. You trust it. It's not a mess. I think data quality, data hygiene is the number one important thing here to start, right? So we'll call that step zero. Add a couple other things on top of this. I think, audit or analyze your internal workflows, right? Where can you identify where time's being lost now? Where does repetitive effort sit? Where manual process is involved? It's heavy. Where do you think your biggest ROI opportunities would be, right? What too many like skilled people are spending too much manual time doing what, right, in your accounting workflows. So I'd say understanding your current internal workflows, where can you have the biggest ROIs? That's an important step. Define some use cases, right? I don't know, come up with 10, 15 different use cases based on those workflows, and, rank them, and then start with one or two or three, and go down the list. And how can I automate this, or how can I make this more efficient? How can I change this workflow with AI technology? I think those are kind of three key important steps to follow. And then I'd say another good idea is, if you have a larger team, or depending on your team size, maybe name an internal champion, right? Like an AI champion that's a curious in the business, right, on your team, and can help lead right from the front, right? And people can go to on your team. And I think that's another good idea, as you take these first steps with your accounting team.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Pete, that resonates, everything that you mentioned. And it made me think of when I had my moment, came into work, sitting here looking at all this work I'm being asked to do, not having enough time, not having enough resources. And I finally had to sit back and think, how am I going to achieve this? This is what I'm being asked to do, but I don't have the resources or the time to do this. So I thought, okay, AI, here we go. Right. You say that this is the digital workforce. That really clicked for me. I heard that, and it was kind of like, wow, 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 way back when, but I had to make that real. I had to make it real. It's like, okay, if I don't have enough resources today, I'm not going to get enough in the near future. What is it that I can do to help me do my job? And that's when I dug in. And that's what I think everyone here, if you could just do that, come in with your cup of coffee in the morning, sit down, and before you begin doing your day-to-day work, ask, do I really need to be doing this, or can I build an agent to do it? Right? that's the kind of question that you should ask. If I had one more person that I can hire, maybe 3 people or 5 people, what would I have them do? And then ask yourself, well, can't I build an agent to have those people do that work? Right? It truly, truly is a mind shift. So, once again, just look at everything that you're doing on a day-to-day basis. Ask yourself what could be handed off to an agent, and then you just have to dive in and figure it out. And you will, trust me, you will. There are just these capabilities are absolutely amazing. Depending, it doesn't matter what tool you pick, you are just going to have your mind blown by what it can do for you. It is that shift. You have to make the shift. And when you do, I think that you're really going to find that it doesn't take more resources really to get much more done and for your own individual contribution to help grow the business.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's great advice, guys. And, it's like the age-old leading by example, right? If you're leading a team and we know this is where the world is headed, be the person that is setting the example and helping your team to upskill, right? And move along in that direction. That's great advice. Appreciate you both. Thank you guys so much for such a fabulous conversation. Really appreciate you guys sharing just your real world insights, but leveraging some of the data too that's in our AI report. So if you haven't already, access the resources tab, download that report. We surveyed CFOs, controllers, IT admins, Salesforce admins, a lot of different types of folks. And we put that all in a report for you that you can download today. So make sure you grab that. All right, let's go into our Q&A. I know we've got a few questions that came in, so let's take a peek. And if you haven't submitted a question yet, please feel free to do so now. The Q&A is definitely still open. Okay, let's start with this one. Where are you guys seeing AI drive impact the most in accounting today? And where have you seen it as just experimental without much return?
So I have seen working with customers, for those few that are actually diving in and using AI, they're seeing results. They're able to analyze their data to get the metrics that they couldn't get otherwise, right? Imagine that you can take, whatever data that you have, and every business is different, and the business needs to understand how certain pieces of it are functioning. Imagine you could just use AI to dig in there and really understand that slice of that business. And again, they weren't able to understand it in any other way before they had these tools available to them. So I mean, it's just that, and I've seen not a lot of customers, but some have automated processes. So they have other systems that they're using to grab information from and do something with, right? That are external. If they're isolated systems, and I'm not sure what kind of systems they are, but I've heard customers say that they have built some, custom apps around the way that they work, right? So, and this is really doable using whatever apps that you're using today to go out, as I mentioned, you create an app in Claude to do a very specific piece. Maybe that piece isn't incorporated in one of the apps that you're using today, but they can go off, they can create an app, and they can do something there and then feed the information from that app into whatever their operational systems or their finance systems.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I will say too, one of the things that Pete had mentioned earlier that I think we really need to hone in on again is that step 0, right? Of making sure your data is in the right place. Because as we've said before, right, the output's only going to be as good as your data and what that structure is looking like. So coming at it from that lens first, like there are certainly probably some of you on the call that yes, you should be learning and exploring all the AI tools that are out there on the market, what's available to you, but simultaneously be taking a look at your own data and your own tech stack to really evaluate if you're ready to take that step to actually incorporate AI into your workflows. That step matters more than I think a lot of vendors will tell you. So if you want to learn a little bit more just about that process and what that could look like for you, we've got our request a demo button up on the screen. Our team would be happy to talk with you about that and what that could look like for you so that when the time is right, you can make the most out of AI and not get, not always be in experimental mode, actually start to see some real return on that. Yeah, thank you, Mary, for sharing that. Let's take a couple more questions. Okay, Pete, here's one for you. This is a good one. If you were building a finance team from scratch today, what would be your first 3 hires?
Good question. So I think it's less about, it's more about the person. I still think I need a controller or head of finance, right? I think it's the skill set of that individual, right? And these individuals that you do hire. So, Mary mentioned this earlier, but through that process, is it a forward-thinking controller or senior accountant that built an agent to solve a problem, right? Do they have that skill? Have they dove in? Are they adding that skill set, and not just doing manual work in their same system that they've been doing for the last 10 years, right? It's much more of, are you developing as an accountant or a controller or senior accountant to take on some of these new technologies and solve problems in a different way, a more efficient way, where you can be 120% more productive, right, than you were a year ago, right? And that should grow as you continue to adopt these new technologies. So I still think I need a controller. They're very much the reviewer mindset, right, already. It's just that, did they go through that shift to do their work differently, right? Not do as much manual reconciliation. Like, how can I utilize AI? How can I make myself more efficient? So I think it's leaning in on AI and also cross-functional, right? Do you understand the other pieces of the business? Because you're going to be asked to do more. You're going to be asked to understand more. So I do think there's an aspect here of someone that understands on your team versus the traditional accountant. Would you hire someone much more product savvy, right? From what you're on, say in our instance, Salesforce and Accounting Seed, right? Do you hire someone with more of an IT background or IT admin background that can build out some skills and agents, right, to do a lot of this underlying accounting work with knowledge from, the CFO or controller? So I think there's definitely a position there that we may see develop into the finance team that's building agents, adding skills, right, to do more underlying work versus the traditional junior accountant doing the work. So that would be something I definitely consider, and I think all finance teams should. So whatever app you're on, but someone with that product knowledge skill set may be really important for finance teams in the future.
That's great. Thank you for sharing that, Pete. Let's take a couple more. Okay, we've touched on this, but I do want to answer this one again. What would you guys say to someone who is genuinely worried that AI is coming for their specific job?
Yeah, I would just say, don't worry. It is not, from what I've seen so far, I will not trust an agent 100%, but I will let it do 95% of the work, and I will be reviewing all of that work. I will have a system when we get to that point. I will have a system that allows me to see what work was done last night while I was sleeping. I'm going to come in the morning with my cup of coffee, and instead of doing the work, I'm going to be reviewing all of the agents' work. Can you imagine if agents were doing 95% of the work and no one was reviewing it? How could you possibly rely on the numbers? How could you? Pete, would you rely on those numbers?
No, I don't think so. I agree. Don't be worried. Do lean into the new AI technologies, right? Yeah, I think you may experience that your your business is going to grow, and you may not bring on as many junior accountants, right, as you would have previously, and agents may do some of that work. But I think, like I said earlier in the discussion, that base accounting knowledge is still needed, especially in a reviewer mode. We need accountants. As we know, there's a shortage of accountants. I'd say just upskill yourself in AI technologies, and just you're going to have to go through a shift a bit on how you do your work and become more of a reviewer, as Mary was saying.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. The saying goes, you can either complain or you can conquer,
Mhm.
right? So just, I see so much, especially if anybody's scrolling on LinkedIn, right? There's, oh, fear about this and worry about this. Just put that out of your mind, right? A lot of that is clickbait anyway, those conversations. If you just take the time to dive in and learn, you're already taking a step that a lot of people are not taking. You're already ahead by just being in the exploration mode. So don't be afraid just to take that one jump, right? And then once you experienced it, like Pete and Mary have said, you will have that aha moment. Like that will happen for you. So rather than sitting in fear and worry, think about all the things that you could do and how exciting that really is. It doesn't happen all the time in our everyday corporate work environment that we get to have that much fun and excitement and learning something new. So think about it from that perspective versus being worried about it. I have seen a lot of people asking about like a demo and seeing some of our AI capabilities. As always, you can always request a demo here. We're not prepared to give you guys a demo today. This was really just a conversation around it. But also feel free to go to accountingseed.com. We've got tons of videos about our AI agents, AI invoice capture, a lot of different resources there on our site. But of course, we would love to talk to you and show you it in real time and also hear from you about what are things you're experiencing. And we can talk to you one-on-one about how AI can specifically help you today. So, again, Pete, Mary, thank you guys so much for today's conversation. And thank you all on the call today for spending part of your day with us. If you would like to hear more conversations like this, get more information about AI and how it's evolving in the accounting profession, again, head on over to accountingseed.com under resources. We've got tons of on-demand webinar content, blogs, and guides that can help you along in this journey. So thank you guys so much. And until next time, have a great rest of your day.